Welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. Here's your host, Alex Klausner and Bobby Carney.
Welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show, where Dynasty never sleeps. I'm your host, Alex Klausner. I am joined today by my friend Bobby Carney and a new host. This is Zack Donovan. He is a guy who's been in many Dynasty leagues with me and is the guy who beats me in the championship all the time, me and Bobby both. He is probably the reason that each of us is not probably the holder of a combined like 8 rings or something like that. So yeah, thanks, Zach. Appreciate that, keeping our trophy cabinets nice and bare. But anyway,
got to do it.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. So he's going to be here weekly with us on the Sunday Big Show, breaking things down, and he's going to be keeping us all informed with takes. He's also really a lot more, I would say, experienced in like the super flex and best ball side of things. So you're going to have a lot of great takes about like those formats coming from him. Really excited to kind of break down different valuations of different dynasty assets with them. So we're going to dive into those assets this week. We saw a lot of our favorites kind of come back to life. Some of our guys that we have been praying for big weeks from finally delivering on what we were promised. And we're going to just get right into one of them. And that is wide receiver Malik Nabers, who shined in his team's loss to the Washington Commies. They unfortunately fell to the Commies 21-18. I say unfortunately because we are on this podcast with a Giants fan. You can see him wearing the hat. It's real. He is a Giants fan. He has been suffering through the Daniel Jones era, but standing strong with that team. And here it is. The wide receiver one is in town. Zach, why don't you tell us about this game from Malik Nabers and kind of what you can expect from him in Dynasty going forward?
More of this is what I think. Going into the draft, I really saw him and Marv as being these elite level talents that are situation proof. They just don't have competition and the talent is there. They're going to get the volume, and with that volume, they are going to do things with it after the catch, and they're going to score you fantasy points because much like DeAndre Hopkins in Texans, and good luck trying to trade for him now because the cat's out of the bag.
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, I think it was going to always be a thing of like good luck trying to trade for him anyway. Like, I don't think this game is necessarily going to, I don't think last week, I should say, was going to scare off the person that just spent, whatever rookie pick they spent to get Malik Nabers, right? And I think that similar to kind of what you're saying, I feel like this kind of game absolutely confirms that this guy is going to be kind of that volume hog in New York. I'd certainly, my thing kind of has always been, I'm willing to take shots on guys who play in quote unquote bad offenses, because in these like empty wide receiver rooms, and you get somebody with talent that walks in there, it's like someone's got to catch the ball, especially if you're on a bad team. Game scripts go negative, you're going to be throwing the football, right? So I definitely think that Malik Nabers benefited from that. We also saw in this game today, we saw a great day from Jaden Daniels. He had a really efficient day. He had 10 rushes, 44 rushing. He was 23 of 29 for 226. He didn't score any touchdowns, but he certainly looked like a really efficient quarterback in this game. And I definitely think he is certainly beginning to supplant Caleb as the fantasy rookie quarterback to own. We also saw a great day from Brian Robinson in this game that was worthy of noting. He finished with 133 rushing yards on 17 carries. He also additionally ran 18 routes. And though he only earned 3 targets, I do think that is something to mention. Okay, I am going to get a little bit into, I guess, what my team, or one of my teams, you see some Bears memorabilia back here, but for a long time. I have also been a Tennessee Titans fan. And despite living in Chicago, yes, I do still root for them a little bit. And boy, another disappointing result for the Titans this week. They managed a meager 17 points of offense in a loss to the New York Jets, who beat them 24-17. Now, one of the guys we are going to talk about in this game is a guy who really shined, and that is New York Jets running back. No. I'm not about to say Breece Hall. I'm about to say Braylon Allen. Okay, so let's get into the numbers for Breece and Braylon, and then we're going to kind of talk about these guys as fantasy assets and kind of how this is going to work. All right, so Breece had 14 rushes, 62 yards, 0 touchdowns, 7 catches on 8 targets for 52 yards and a touchdown. Now, Braylon Allen, by comparison, had half the carries. He had 7. He got 33 yards rushing. Okay, nothing to write home about, but he got a touchdown. And additionally, another passing touchdown. So you're seeing Braylon Allen get in the end zone. He's looking really explosive when he's on the field. And it does look like he is going to be a factor and he's going to be taking away from Breece Hall. So Bobby, let's say you don't have Braylon Allen on your team and you want to get him. After a game like that, what do you think you're going to have to throw at the guy who has Braylon Allen to get him if he's not already on the waiver wire?
Well, if you're not noticing from my big smile, it's because you've not looked at my roster and that I spent a 3rd-round pick on Braylon Allen as my handcuff for Breece Hall. So I do have him. I'm very happy to have him. And I think definitely as Breece owners and stuff, we're already seeing running backs go down. There's a lot of people that have either a UFA assignment or a 3rd-round pick attached to him. He was very lowly draft. He was a very low draft pick for a lot of dynasty owners. So again, for some of that stuff, if you're trying to find someone to fill a gap for some of these injuries with like Pacheco and stuff now, and you're just like, hey, let me just see if I can get a handcuff for somebody else and just pray that they can become that guy. Like, he's probably easily affordable, but if you're in a situation like mine where it's like, no, he is my Breece cuff, he's not going anywhere on this roster. So I think it's going to be depending on the situation that that team has.
Absolutely. Now, there is something else I want to dive into, which is the other side of this, okay, which is for the Breece Hall owners out there, right? Zach, I think you have kind of an interesting take on this, and I want you to speak to it a little bit. And you've said in kind of some of the conversations we've had around this player that this performance by Braylon Allen really signals to you some bad news for like the Breece Hall dynasty owners. So why don't you dive into that a little bit and kind of give us your take and why you think that this is going to be a negative for them?
Well, I wouldn't go far to say it's like a huge negative. It just knocks him off the pedestal that I had him on, which was the #1 running back in Dynasty. But Braylon Allen, not only did he do well with his touches, he was given very valuable opportunities. He wasn't just spelling Breece Hall. He was given touches in the red zone where they needed the running back to perform. And he did both times, got touchdowns every time they gave it to him. So this kind of means he's more than a handcuff. He's he's like a Warren where you can flex him regardless of whether Breece is there. And if Breece goes down, he's, an RB1, a high-end RB1. So I think he and Jordan Mason right now are in contention for the most valuable handcuff in Dynasty right Absolutely. So he gets 16 targets, catches 12 of them for 117 yards. We've been waiting for this for a long time as a prospect. We think very highly of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and of course Marvin Harrison, all the players that Jackson Smith and Jigma was, competing for targets with in Ohio, and he like led by miles and performed. And when you can get that kind of attention from CJ Stroud, right? I'm not tripping. Yeah. Um like over those guys that consistently, it feels automatic, and it really feels like it has to be a special case for him to not work out. And it was last year. I mean, they did not know how to use him. They were throwing it to him behind the scrimmage all the time. I can't remember what his ADOT was, but it was abysmal. So, they fire their OC and they bring in Grubb, and now things are fixed. This is a big coming out party for him. It was very clear they wanted to get him the ball. Just watching it's really, usually I see JSN kind of be just about his business, but there was a time where he went on a route and he made a catch in the middle of the field between like a narrow hole between three defenders, and he just snagged it, got like 15, 17 yards, and got up and was just like showboating and looked more like neighbors. Like he was feeling himself. You could tell there was like a release of tension that we were all feeling and he's feeling, and just a big finally. And I don't think it's going anywhere.
One thing that I do think, when you say I don't think it's going anywhere, that I did want to point out that we did have in this game is that Geno did drop back 44 times. Now, I think this is tied somewhat to something that you pointed out, which is that Charbonnet didn't have the greatest game in the world here, right? He was not particularly effective with his opportunities running the football. And so with no Kenneth Walker today, Charbonnet kind of struggling, maybe the game plan kind of dictated, okay, Geno's got to go be the guy to go win us this game. And we're going to be dropping back maybe more than normal because we don't have Kenneth Walker there. Are you concerned about Geno's usage coming back down to earth, Bobby? Is that something that you think we may have happen?
I think a lot of the Geno numbers right now with his passing numbers, it is just because of the running back situation that was today. He can move a ball, but yes, he's not supposed to be doing 44 passes. I think this is just we will see this go back to earth a little bit once Kenneth Walker's back, but it'll just be time will tell. I'm a little worried about this oblique injury, so if this injury does persist where we might lose Kenneth Walker again, you might see another passing volume like this happen again.
Well, it's definitely something I think for JSN owners to keep an eye on, is kind of how the usage as it relates to Kenneth Walker and his availability continues throughout the year. But I would love the idea of those two being able to coexist, because just the volume that we got from Geno today was awesome for DK and awesome for JSN. We didn't mention DK's numbers, but he had a huge day as well. He had 14 targets, 10 receptions. He had a huge long touchdown in this game on a busted coverage and took full advantage of that. And it looked like a kind of like a vintage DK Metcalf, big play. And that is kind of what we've always been hoping that this Seattle offense could amount to. Another thing to note from this game is that Antonio Gibson, who is a guy that we were previously saying perhaps left for dead in this kind of Ramondre bell cow thing in New England. Well, Antonio Gibson, 96 yards today on 11 carries. He definitely got involved, and it does look like there are games where Ramondre Stevenson is still going to get those bell cow numbers, but Antonio Gibson can be a factor for you as well out of the flex. Now, we talked a little bit about Geno and kind of how he is this quarterback who maybe is a game manager type. You're not going to be counting on him to win you the week all the time. But let's go ahead and talk about a guy who I think a lot of people perceive that way, but is a guy that we on the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show told you maybe was a guy that you wanted to add in your leagues, and that is Fantasy QB9. Say it with me one more time. Fantasy QB9, Sam Darnold. Okay, Sam Darnold won his game this week. Minnesota 23, San Francisco 17. He downs the vaunted Kyle Shanahan 49ers. Okay, Sam Darnold is a winner, and you heard it here first on the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. That's why you tune in. That's why they pay us the big bucks. Advertisers, you heard that. All right, now, another thing that we saw in this game was Sam Darnold deliver a 97-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson, who had a big day. We did also see Justin Jefferson leave with an injury, but fear not, fantasy football friends. Justin Jefferson will miss no time. He says he will be back. So maybe Jalen Naylor could be better left on the waiver wire. We'll see how the injury progresses, how that affects his involvement.
It was a good day. We do like to see him perform, not fall flat on his face against the San Francisco defense. There is a little bit of institutional knowledge there, I think. He's played against that defense quite a bit. Not to take anything away from his ability to execute there. But for me, I don't see any rushing upside. And basically in Dynasty, if you're looking at Sam Darnold, you have to bet on the case that he performed so well this year that he earns a starting job somewhere next year. If someone wants to give you a price for him that reflects, that being very much a not guaranteed thing, then maybe you can stash him or get him thrown in. For me though, if I have Darnold on my roster, unless I am really, really relying on him as a contender, I'm trying to sell high.
Well, what would you say the price that you would accept for Sam Darnold would be?
I mean, the first, if it's super flex, I am definitely going to try and hold out until someone is desperate enough to give me a first, right? I mean, at this point, it's week 2, so I probably already talked to the JJ McCarthy owner. So if a deal was there, it probably would have gotten done last week. So if there's a contender that, what about the Tua owner, right? Maybe the Tua owner wants him. Maybe an Anthony Richardson owner is freaking out, and you can get in there and be like, yeah, here's Darnold and a first for A-Rich, if you still believe in A-Rich, because he has a much higher upside and ceiling than Darnold does.
Something that I'd like to follow up on is you're mentioning a little bit of like Sam Darnold, like if he finds a job, and I think you're right. That's if you're trading for him for a long-term view, it would be where he's getting a job. That would be a little bit of my concern too, is just like there's so many young quarterbacks out there right now. We are seeing a little bit of like a team give up on Bryce maybe, but there's so many other teams that have young quarterbacks, and it's just I don't know where that job is next year.
Well, you never know year to year, right? Like what the quarterback situations are going to be, because you know how the NFL is. It's what have you done for me lately? So while, I mean, yeah, and it's so the other factor I want people to consider also, right, is that Kevin O'Connell essentially is a guy who runs a derivative of that Kyle Shanahan offense. And Sam Darnold is most effective essentially when he's in that offense. That's where we saw that success from San Francisco come from. And we're also seeing that again in Minnesota, right? It's like when you plug Sam Darnold into that particular offense, then you're starting to see results. I could see, for example, let's say Tua Tagovailoa has to walk away from the game, very suddenly, because of his concussions. Well, who else runs a Shanahan offense? Mike McDaniel. Maybe Sam Darnold is playing for Miami next year, right? Right? Or Matt Stafford suddenly retires. Those two right there are great landing spots for Darnold, potentially that could very well open up next year, and be looking for that guy to say, hey man, we need a bridge. We need that guy to walk in and stabilize the situation for a year while, like you said, those young quarterbacks, for example, let's say you draft Shedeur Sanders. That guy's going to probably need some time to develop to the NFL, right? So there's your case for Sam Darnold potentially starting somewhere next year. I'm a little more bullish on that because I just see how teams kind of are always looking for that quarterback to come in and these guys play. I mean, I just think, especially in Superflex, there's probably some room for Sam Darnold to really have some utility in that kind of game. So, right. Now, we are going to move on, speaking of quarterback play, to a pair of quarterbacks that mixed opinions on both of these guys in the Cleveland Browns Jacksonville Jaguars game. Now, why I'm saying mixed opinions on Deshaun Watson? Well, he actually had not too bad of a game this week. There were some times where he looked a little bit vintage Deshaun Watson. We saw him get into the end zone on a rush touchdown. Where's that been? However, we also on the other side saw the very, very highly paid, very, very highly compensated Trevor Banks Stadium. Trevor Lawrence really struggled at Trevor Bank this week. He is starting to it's kind of starting to look like perhaps an overpay, but we are also seeing him get the ball to Brian Thomas. But that's not really the story, even though Brian Thomas, yes, he had a big day. To me, the story is Amari Cooper. And oh my gosh, what disappointing results he is getting on his target share. This is now the second week where we've seen him get wide receiver 1 targets, but the result is like 3 catches for 11 yards this week. That is a stat line. 3 catches, 11 yards. Now, a lot of people are looking at Amari Cooper probably as a low-end wide receiver 1 candidate, wide receiver 2. Zach, take us through Amari Cooper. Are you panicking if you are one of the people that's got him on your roster? Are you pulling him out of that roster? Are you trading him? How are you treating this situation?
So Amari Cooper, the way I play Dynasty, is someone I would have sold by now, just because, at this point in the life cycle, the depreciation starts hitting hard and fast. It's kind of like a new car. He's hitting that new car curve. And if he's still on my roster, I've tried to get rid of him and I can't. And it's definitely not going to be easier now. I think you're stuck with him, man. You got to hold and hope he comes back. And then you're waiting for that window where he has a game like he did last year, where he pops off for 4 touchdowns. And then you can immediately hit the trade block button on Sleeper and find a contender, just get out, because I'm completely out on the Browns passing offense. I like Nick Chubb as a come on late guy this year. I don't think they can run the offense through Deshaun Watson and win games. I think he's mentally cooked. I think he's not coming back.
One passing asset that I do think was kind of interesting is somebody that I would say that I've been out on over the past couple of years and have traded away in a lot of leagues, and that's Jerry Jeudy. Suddenly in Cleveland with his new contract, we are starting to see a little bit of life from Jerry Jeudy. Now, I'm not saying that this guy is going out and becoming like some dominator in your leagues, but he had, 5 catches on 6 targets for 73 yards, and he's starting to produce some results on the field. I do see with Cooper's usage, perhaps an opportunity for Jerry Jeudy to really supplant him as the receiver in this offense and perhaps be the guy to own in Cleveland. Now we're going to move on. Speaking of wide receivers to own, now this one is going to be an interesting conversation. I want to really get both your take on this guy. We're going to start with Bobby. And here's the question. Is Alec Pierce the wide receiver to own in Indy? Let's just talk about that, because we got all this hype around Michael Pittman. We got the contract. We got Josh Downs in his big rookie year, and now they drafted Adonai Mitchell. Now, all of these guys have roughly the same draft capital. We've seen, I think Josh Downs was a 3rd-round pick. Everyone else is a 2nd-round pick. So we've seen similar, roughly, investments in all of these guys, but Alec Pierce is the one who's really showing out with the production right now. So, Bobby, start with that. Start with, how are you looking at Alec Pierce and his position in this pecking order?
No, I think he's slowly becoming Anthony Richardson's favorite target. I think the number one thing is I think Anthony trusts him. I think Anthony trusts him. He can throw it up there and he's going to come down with it. And that I've watched some of the games where he's trying to give it to Adonai Mitchell and Adonai Mitchell just drops it. Or he's trying to give it to Josh Downs. Those other guys are getting similar targets like Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce is coming through and these other guys aren't right now. So that things could change, but I think he is the guy that Anthony Richardson trusts right now when things are going south.
One thing I did want to mention is I do think Josh Downs has been injured for the past 2 weeks. So one thing that I definitely want to caution people to remember is that Josh Downs does return, and that may muddy the picture a little bit here. Now, Zach, with that in mind, are you, how do you value Alec Pierce? Are you sitting there saying, well, okay, Josh Downs is going to come back, maybe I'm going to devalue Alec Pierce, I'm not going to rush out and try to get him? Or are you kind of saying, you know what, Anthony Richardson is a new quarterback, Josh Downs' production came mostly from Gardner Minshew, not Anthony Richardson, the chemistry may be different, maybe Pierce really is the guy that supplants Downs?
Well, I think A-Rich's matchups, we'd have to look it up, but I think he did actually like Downs. The few games he started last year, it did seem like they had chemistry. I think Josh Downs is the kind of guy who's going to demand a bit of attention because he's that guy in the slot who just gets open. He's just going to be an easy guy to throw to. So I'm not really confident that this Alec Pierce streak continues. He does sync up with Anthony Richardson's big arm, and I can see why it's gonna happen. I'd rather have him in best ball than try and play the game of when do I start him, because I think variance is gonna start hitting him soon. And also Adonai Mitchell is 21 years old, so with Adonai Mitchell developing and Josh Downs coming back, I think and again, like you mentioned at the beginning, Michael Pittman's contract, like they are committed to him as the one. So this looks like a window where you maybe can sell high on Alec Pierce. I don't mind being wrong if I can get enough for him, right? If you sell at a high enough price, you're never wrong.
Here's another valuation I really want to dive into with you guys. This was, I think, one of the games in which we really saw a lot of what Anthony Richardson's critics were kind of saying about him come to fruition. That's the struggles with accuracy, the struggles reading the defense. That was an ugly game. That was a really ugly game for Anthony Richardson. Now, the question is as the fantasy owner in Dynasty, are you worried in the long term that the critics were right? Now, let's start with this. Everyone here went to UF. Okay, we all love Anthony Richardson. No shade at the guy. We love him. He's awesome. We're all proud of him for making it and being this like top 5 guy for the University of Florida. That's like a huge accomplishment. That said, we got to talk about it. It's Dynasty. All right, so let's start with Bobby. What are you doing with Anthony Richardson in your leagues where you have him?
I would still be holding on to him. Similar to the last time we talked about Anthony Richardson, one of our big talking points was the 17 games. That 17 games combined with college and that. So we're now at game 18. So it's still there. We're still going to have growing pains. Was the Houston
indie game, that was a good sign of the positives. And then this was our regression game. This was our Kentucky game. Just it was rough to watch, and the picks were there. Yeah, the Hail Mary pick at the end, like that's still on the stat sheet to make it just worse. But those first two picks were really bad. I mean, really, really bad.
Now in a super flex league, obviously, I think, Zach, wouldn't you say that you'd probably, there's like no way you're letting go of Anthony Richardson if you have him, right?
No, and let's bring up what Justin Fields did last year. I mean, the NFL has clearly said that, I mean, he's getting his time in Pittsburgh, but after last year, the NFL kind of said Justin Fields is not really a starting quarterback in the league. And he was amazing for fantasy. Rushing is just too important. 50 rushing yards. I mean, what do you have to score? What do you have to do in passing yards to get the same amount of points as 125 yards, right? Like 2.5 times, I think. It's just a cheat code. And so it doesn't really matter if you're a good quarterback, if you have that kind of rushing outside, especially when A-Rich has those deep bombs that he's connecting on some of them. And that's really all you need. But to bring up the actual NFL quarterback conversation, I'm getting kind of big Josh Allen vibes here. This guy is basically a little more than a high school quarterback when it comes to how much reps, and how much exposure he's had to managing an NFL offense and executing it. He's super raw. He's learning against, in this game, a defense that goes to the NFC Championship pretty much every year. This is going to happen. We're going to go through all of this. He's going to be cutting his teeth on NFL defenses when most people with his level of experience would be cutting their teeth on college. So, and I believe in Shane Steichen. I like having the quarterback attached to that guy. I think he's a great coordinator. He's gonna be
You pretty much just took the words
coach.
right out of my mouth on that one, actually. I was going to say one thing that's great for him is that he's attached to a quarterback guru like Shane Steichen, who we saw get really great years out of Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, and Gardner Minshew even last year. Like, he's got a great history with quarterbacks if you really look at his resume and what he's done with the quarterback position in particular. And I think that he can work that magic with Anthony Richardson, and we are in year 2 of Anthony Richardson's contract. So even from a dynasty perspective, if you're really thinking from a 3-year window, even if you're saying, okay, maybe Anthony Richardson doesn't get renewed or what, they don't pick up the option, they move on. Well, you've still got 3 more years of what Zach was talking about with that rushing floor. Now we are going to move on also to our next game here, which is Bobby's favorite, Tampa Bay Buccaneers defeating the Detroit Lions 23-20. The story, I think, really here was going to be the return of the sun god. He had massive numbers in today's game. And one of the things that I think that he really did beyond just get those targets was say to the world, okay, I'm back, but also I can be back in this offense where everyone else is also eating. We saw Jameson Williams get his. We saw David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs also give you great fantasy production. But part of that, I think, also was the fact that Jared Goff dropped back, I want to say 55 times in this game. Okay, so there was a lot of passing work going on to feed all of these assets in the game. Now, basically the question is do you see that, Bobby, being a result of Tampa's run defense kind of forcing them into that kind of game script and how they're doing things? Or do you see that being more something where they're just going to throw the ball 55 times a game and try to make that their game plan?
I think it was a little bit of Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay does have a really good run defense. Now, granted, we are still missing Kalijah Cansey right now, so that is, but we're still not missing a beat on our rush defense. Our secondary was very banged up into that game. We had no Antoine Winfield. Like Zion McCollum was at least able to get off concussion protocol right before the game and actually got an interception. So that was, I think, a lot of like the Lions knew Will Winfield wasn't going to play. Like Bryce Hall is out for the season. They knew they had guys that were not going to be there, and it's like we're going to go and we're going to throw the ball all over the place because why run into the Buccaneers' strengths? So I do think the passing numbers were a little bit more of a situational of what was going on with Tampa Bay in that game. But still, at least it shows you like when they have to do that, they can do that. Because you're going to have games where they're in negative scripts and they're going to have to throw the ball that much.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the things that I think that we have just seen over these years is that this Detroit Lions offense provides. Um, we've been able to see that Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery tandem can effectively kind of form a 1A, 1B, almost like those Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara splits, which is actually notable because this guy, Ben Johnson, is kind of from that Dan Campbell tree, which is off that Sean Payton tree, right? So there is kind of a connection in terms of how these guys use their running backs and deploy those running backs. So if you're kind of thinking of this as an extension of that Sean Payton ideology, you can kind of expect that these running backs are going to continue to give you usable volume, even though they're in that kind of committee. And that is something. But the other notable thing is JMO. We've been seeing Jameson Williams really come on and give people, I think, the thing that they've been waiting for, which is this explosive downfield element to this Detroit Lions offense. Zach, can you take us through Jameson Williams a little bit and whether or not you think his kind of breakout that he's been enjoying over these past couple of weeks is sustainable over the long term?
We did say that Goff is supporting everyone. I do want to mention that Laporta was a casualty of this Lions offense becoming more prolific. And last week, Amon-Ra was the casualty. So not to be Lord Varys about it, but this is no longer a game for two players. Like, you've got Jameson Williams, you've got Jahmyr Gibbs, you've got Sam Laporta, you've got the Sun God. Like, I think week to week, there's going to be an odd man out, unless it's an absolute shootout. So Jameson Williams is absolutely here to stay. Finally, it didn't really make sense what was going on with him. It must have been the injury, delaying his development as a rookie into, like, it's finally here, and wow.
Now let's get into that a little bit. Are
offense...
you really are you concerned about Sam Laporta and his early season usage? Because
no, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I see it as a carousel, right? I think he's gonna have his games. But like I said, the Lions offense is becoming one of the top 5 in the league, so there's room to support all these guys. I just think week to week, you can't count on the consistency that you got from Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta last year. There's going to be more week to week volatility. Best ball, you're not going to notice.
Right. Now, one thing I did want to mention, and this is just going to be I just have to say it on the pod because it's crazy. Baker Mayfield right now is the quarterback 1 in fantasy football.
He is. No, I think right now, if this is how he's going to play for the rest of the year, he's going to win MVP. I mean,
I think we could seriously talk about it for sure. I mean, why not? Like,
it's what's absolutely he's delivering the ball to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and that's what to be expected in the offense. The crazy thing for me is he got sacked 5 times that day. He should have been sacked 12 times. I don't know what voodoo he's pulling back there to get out of some of these plays. He was doing it in the Washington game too. There be these plays that are just completely broken down. He should be sacked, and he's either rushing for a first down or throwing it downfield for 20 yards. It's incredible what he's doing right now.
Well, this is all the stuff that made him a number one overall pick. I feel like people like look at him and forget that this guy was a number one overall pick in the NFL, but he was. And he was for a reason. And it's because he displayed great ability to do things like that and make these kinds of plays. And yeah, the play that he's putting on the field is everything that we thought Baker Mayfield's upside in the NFL could be. Now, speaking of guys who are really achieving their upside in the NFL and creating an incredible redemption story, how about the redemption of Derek Carr, who I can't believe I'm saying it, is currently fantasy quarterback 2 behind Baker Mayfield. Carr was 11 for 16. He had 243 yards on the day, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but he also ran one in, and he has just been absolutely the trigger man behind a Saints offense that is crushing people. They beat Dallas 44-19, and they have, this stat is incredible, have scored on every single offensive possession this season. Okay, what are we doing with Derek Carr? Zach, why don't you talk about this from the Superflex perspective and kind of what this means for Derek Carr, Superflex, Dynasty, and kind of how he's used?
Man, his points were 21.82 points. So, I mean, it was a serviceable game. What was he? 2 touchdowns, couple hundred yards. It's kind of in the Sam Darnold category for me. Like, I'm not floored. I mean, from a real NFL perspective, I'm like, what is going on? What timeline is this? From a fantasy perspective, I'm like, okay, Derek Carr is having some good games. Instead of being a QB3, maybe you can think of him as a QB2 this year. The Saints are really up in the air for me. I'm not sure what to think of, though.
One of the things that I would say about Derek Carr is that he's been wildly efficient. You are not going to typically see too many quarterbacks produce QB2 in fantasy numbers when they're throwing the ball 16 times. That's just not something you're going to see very often. So it's the efficiency. I was going to say it's the efficiency. It's the volume that really concerns me, right? Because we're going to probably see that come back to earth. Now, I'm not going to discredit it. He did go up against a Dallas defense that looked really tough in week 1 and has Micah Parsons on it. Like, that is an accomplishment to go out there and demolish a defense like that. But I think, I heard you say it earlier, like Alvin Kamara is also a big factor in Derek Carr's success and how that's been going as well. So it's really opening up his ability to distribute the ball. Guys like Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, things like that. So that is something. Now, here's another guy that I wanted to mention. Jalen Tolbert for the Dallas Cowboys had a pretty interesting game today where we saw Jalen Tolbert get, I want to say, 8 targets, 6 receptions, and he was contributing in the yardage department as well. Now, he didn't get in the end zone, but one play that really stood out to me and why I think Jalen Tolbert is somebody that you maybe want to look out for before we move on to our next game is the thing with Jalen Tolbert is that he went back. There was a particular play where I believe there was a fumble. And I mean, like, we're talking the ball maybe like 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage or something like that. And Jalen Tolbert comes all the way back from his route out of nowhere, hustles all the way back to the football and keeps possession for the Cowboys. That's not something that shows up on the fantasy radar necessarily, but that is a play that the coach is going to sit there and go, that guy needs to be on the field a lot more than he is on the field right now, because that was a hustle play. That's stuff that gets you more opportunities in this league. And that's something that I think you want to watch out for, A, the usage, but also B, just keep in mind that, like, he is definitely a guy who impressed the coaches with his hustle on that play. Now, we're going to hustle on forward to our next topic. This is a big one. We got big news coming out of Carolina after they lost their game 26-3 to Jim Harbaugh's Los Angeles Chargers. Now, we also had a big, we're going to have a funeral, and then we're going to have like somebody rising from the dead after that. So we're going to start with our funeral, and we are going to say F's in the chat for Bryce Young, who has been officially benched for Andy Dalton by the Carolina Panthers. Bobby, why don't you take us through that decision by your former offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, and what the implications are going to be for our dynasty people out there?
Well, this was a game I really circled when I was wanting to review some of these games. This was a game I really circled where I was going to sit there and go, how bad does Bryce got to play where you're getting benched week 2 into your sophomore season with a new head coach that's your offensive coordinator? And when I was watching it, because the stat line's not that bad, but as I was watching it, the thing that was just driving me up the wall is he would drop back and it would either be straight to check down or it's a quick slant. It was literally, those were the two passes that he was throwing. There'd be the occasional, I think I can count on one hand how many passes went over the first down marker. It was ridiculous how he was just not wanting to drive the ball past the line of scrimmage. And some of that I would make, I don't think it's scheme, because I think that's why he's getting benched, is that it's not scheme. I think it almost just looked like he was just checked out. It's almost like he doesn't want to look bad, so I'm just going to get the ball out of my hand, and you can't blame it on me. I'm just going to throw it over here, let this guy make the play, because I think he's just either with the offensive line, he doesn't want to drive the ball downfield, or he legitimately cannot see down the field. And that's also the problem as well. And I think it's just those two things are Canales has had enough.
Absolutely, man. Those are definitely part of the problem. We did actually see Chuba Hubbard become the beneficiary of some of those checkdowns that you were talking about. He got 11 points for you in PPR, basically off of his receiving work, where he got 4 receptions on 5 targets, only 12 yards, but it's PPR, it gets boosted, right? So that is definitely something to keep in mind. We may also see a lot of checkdowns from Andy Dalton, though, because Andy Dalton definitely not known for his downfield prowess, shall we say. And also not known for his mobility. So we will probably see Chuba Hubbard get a little more involved in the receiving game there. Now we're going to shift over from our funeral for Bryce Young's NFL career, because he out, which is devastating. If you, for example, if you were a guy who in your super flex league went out and spent the 101 on that guy that year, how do you got to be feeling right now? You got to be feeling like Dave Tepper, right? You passed on CJ Stroud, you passed on all these guys. So the thing that I think that really sucks is if you were somebody who kind of was trying to stay patient with Bryce, and you were trying to kind of convince yourself, hey, he's going to come back this year. If you're a Panthers fan that's sitting there, everything's riding on this guy. That's just sad, man. That's a sad position to be in, knowing what you gave up to get him. If you're a dynasty owner, for example, who traded all of your assets to move up to that 101 to get him, or if you're the Panthers who traded the castle away, right, to go get him, that is a just crappy feeling. And now you've got Andy Dalton in, and pretty much if you're the dynasty owner, I would probably say your only hope is you hold and you just say, okay, maybe it's a temporary thing. They're just trying to get him off the field so he can reset, and he can come back later. That's your best hope. But I'm not holding out hope for that. If I have Bryce Young on my team, I'm either cutting him or I am trading him for a third round pick, and I'm just taking anything I can get. You can trade me, Raheem Blackshear from the Carolina Panthers even. I'd probably take it. Why not? Like, it's over, man. So, moving on to the Chargers, since the Bryce Young thing is over, we are going to call that little segment over as well. And we are going to move on from our funeral to our party, because we had someone rise from the grave this week, and that was wide receiver Quentin Johnston. 5 of 6 receptions, 51 yards, 2 touchdowns. The potential was fulfilled this week. We saw what Quentin Johnston was supposed to be in the NFL now coming to fruition in Jim Harbaugh's offense. All right, I'm going to pass this one over to Zach. Is Quentin Johnston real or is he fake? What are we taking away from this?
Well, I will say that Jim Harbaugh knows how to use him. That's what it feels like. He's finally got a coach that knows how to use him. I don't know if this is a very touchdown kind of centric performance. He had 5 of 6 for 51. He beat, was it J.C. Horn? Yes, he beat J.C. Horn on a go route and got a long bomb touchdown. That's where one of them came. And the second one, he was just doing a crosser and he got right in the hole in the zone and settled right in. So it seemed pretty textbook. I don't know if it was just Carolina Panthers being an easy team to beat, an easy defense to figure out, or if Quentin Johnston can last. But I mean, he's at least shown that he's probably the wide receiver 1 or the wide receiver 2 in this offense, pending McConkey's development. In a run-first offense, low passing volume, I'm not too excited. I think you're going to have to rely on these touchdowns. But if it's like an old school James Jones scenario where he's constantly getting touchdowns, then it's fine to rely on touchdowns. So we'll see how it goes. I'm not buying yet.
No, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Let me ask you this, though. Let's say you were buying. Let's say for whatever reason, you are on a team that just needs a receiver. You're freaking desperate, and Quentin Johnston is on the table. Okay, what are you going to offer? And what's the point at which you're out completely?
Yeah, so in this situation, I have to be a Justin Herbert owner looking for the stack, I think. I think that's the only thing that really compels me, like needing a wide receiver and being a Herbert owner and the guy being like, yeah, he's available. I'm not giving up a first for him. Would I give up a second for Quentin Johnston right now? If it was the best option I could get and I was a Herbert owner, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool to be able to get that valuation. So if you're hearing that, maybe you got a second round pick, you got a spare second round pick, you need a receiver, you got Justin Herbert on your team, you want to create that fantasy stack, Quentin Johnston could definitely be somebody, because one thing is that there are going to be owners out there that are trying to sell and just get what they can get, because there are people who last season put a real bad taste in their mouth, and they definitely spent, Quentin Johnston was going as a 105, 106 in even single quarterback leagues last year, right? He was going at near the top of that rookie receiver conversation with the JSNs and the Jordan Addisons. You probably have an owner that drafted Quentin Johnston over Jordan Addison. And that guy is probably sitting there going, yeah, I want out after this game, right? I'm cashing out now, and see what you can get. See if you can get a deal done.
I'm kind of there. I would make my deal with myself. Like, I would absolutely sell Quentin Johnston for a second round pick. In that trade, I'd be like, yeah, take him. And it's really the passing volume that really lad belief plus passing volume. I'm thinking he's destined to be wide receiver 2 upside.
I definitely think there's some value in best ball, though, right? Because of the touchdown upside. So if you are thinking best ball, I definitely think that Quentin Johnston is probably like the receiver to own in that league, maybe over Ladd, due to his touchdown upside and the way that, he's got elite size. He literally like is one of the bigger receivers in the NFL due to, being 6'5". So if he can take advantage of his athleticism and Jim Harbaugh really knows how to use him and they start feeding him consistently, and they have, it's 5 targets last week, 6 targets this week. So Quentin Johnston is a guy that like I was really out on. I was not drafting him. Like you guys remember in our chats when I was just like, nope, staying far away from Quentin Johnston. I am not touching him with a 10-foot pole in the draft, just because I thought the value for what he presented in terms of his raw ability and his inability to really like get in early, like just didn't equal what you were going to have to pay to get him. But right now, I definitely feel that at this depressed price where you're saying I'd sell him for a second, I'd probably pay a second to get him if I didn't have that bias of I drafted him last year, I'm mad. You know what I mean? Then I'm sitting there going, yeah, that guy's probably worth a second. So Quentin Johnston, I think we're kind of settling on he might be a buy, maybe. So let's move on to our next game here. And talk about a guy that good luck buying him. If there is any chance you can get him, pay the iron price, just do it. It is Brock Bowers, who was a dominator from the TE spot in his team's 26-23 victory over the Baltimore Ravens. We are seeing everybody's dream scenario with Brock Bowers come true. The targets are there and he is producing 9 of 9 on 27 routes run for 98 yards from the tight end spot. Bobby, is Brock Bowers the new Dynasty tight end 1?
It might be there. Yeah, it might be there just because of when it comes to the youth, he's producing with Gardner Minshew. I mean, Gardner Minshew's not bad, but like if he can produce with him, imagine what's going to happen when they actually get their franchise guy in there and has that guy delivering to him. So I do really like Brock Bowers and his targets already and that offense. And the other thing is like it's only going to go up when they actually have to start defending the run there. I mean, Zamir White is also 9 carries for 24 yards. They cannot run the ball there. They absolutely cannot. And Antonio Pierce keeps saying he's going to keep running it. Like, oh, we're not doing anything, but I'm going to keep running it. So hopefully one day there might be a decent run game there where they actually might get even more open routes and more opportunities to make bigger plays in the passing game. But it's good to see that they're doing this despite having a run game that's making defenses be one-dimensional against them.
Right. And well, one thing that I did see in this game is that we actually did get some decent volume from Minshew. I mean, he dropped back 38 times. And by the way, he completed 30 of those passes. He's like, I know people really like to kind of trash Gardner Minshew because of the fact that he's kind of a limited upside as a passer. And I understand that, but he is a pretty smart football player. And when he gets on the field, he can actually really dish it. So one thing that I was going to say is, we're watching a little bit of Monday Night Football as we're recording this, and I'm noticing Kyle Pitts is getting some catches. And I think that going into this draft, I think a lot of people were kind of worried about maybe Brock Bowers not living up to this generational tight end prospect hype, right? We've heard that before. We've all been burned by drafting Kyle Pitts in a fantasy league at this point. Like we've all experienced that heartbreak. And now we're getting to see this young tight end kind of go into the league and kind of defy the traditional narrative of tight ends do not produce early. Brock Bowers is producing early. This is the rare situation where you've just got the talent who's NFL ready, plugging into the offense that really needs him, right? And needs him now. And so he's getting those targets. Devontae Adams still got his. He got 12 targets. He got 110 yards and a touchdown. So Devontae Adams still gave you that classic Devontae wide receiver one day. But yeah, Brock Bowers definitely if you're sitting up there as the Brock Bowers owner, you've got to be feeling really good, especially as we've seen a lot of these top tight ends, especially the young ones, fall down, right? We aren't getting those Sam Laporta days where Sam Laporta is looking like he's the tight end one in Dynasty. Travis Kelce, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, also nowhere to be found. So if you're sitting there with Brock Bowers, you got to be feeling like, man, I got one of the best tight ends in Dynasty. Okay, now we are going to move on to a huge day from another big name rookie who a lot of people were looking for this kind of day from, and that is Marvin Harrison Jr. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my foot firmly in the mouth. We said here on this podcast, hey, it's going to be hard to play Marvin Harrison Jr. until you see the big game from him. Well, 1 week later, we saw the big game. And so if you listen to us and you put Marvin Harrison on your bench, sorry about that. You can go ahead and just yell at us in the comments and we'll go ahead and take that. Sometimes you're wrong. It happens, right? So, Zach, you are a guy who has put a lot of draft picks into Marvin Harrison Jr. So why don't you go ahead and break down that day and take your victory lap on that one, my friend?
Oh, yes. I've made big moves to get Marv in a couple leagues, worth every penny. He got it done in like the first quarter. It's almost like the team reacted to all the commentary last week. It's like, oh my God, like we've been seeing Marv ball out. You guys just need to shut up. It's one game. And they did. They shut us up like immediately. It was almost like Kyler went, you want me to throw it to him? Fine, I'll throw it to him. Bomb, touchdown. You happy? And he got 4 for, what was it, 130 and 2 touchdowns. So it was a little weird to see him get such a heavy volume and score like 26 fantasy points in the first quarter and then kind of just trail off for the rest of the game. But it's almost like it's like, all right, we got that out of the way. We proved we use Marv. We don't need to go and use our ultimate weapon anymore. And they just did the rest of the game. So it was kind of weird, but I'm not complaining. I obviously started him where I had him, and he was the number 1 wide receiver on the week just for his performance in 1 quarter. So that shows you the upside of what he can do in a game where he has to be relied on as the guy for all 4 quarters. There's sky's the limit. He's going to be up there with Chase, Jefferson, and CD in Dynasty.
One thing that we saw Kyler Murray say this week that I thought was like one of the funniest things I think I've ever heard a quarterback say, which was when they were asking him, like, why didn't you target Marv last week? And he said, listen, man, I'm not responsible for who I'm throwing to on a given play. You got to talk to the OC about that. And I was just like, really? That's a kind of a weird take. So, well, what I took from it was, oh man, this is the first QB with Neuralink. So Kyler Neuralink Murray was dishing. They had that Neuralink. Just thank you, Elon Musk. That thing was dialed in. Kyler Murray was 17 of 21 for 266 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Also added 5 rushes for 59 yards. This was like the Kyler Murray upside day. This is where you say, okay, this is what this guy can be. So if you're the person that's been kind of sitting there, kind of wading through some of the rougher years of Kyler Murray, this was definitely like your, oh yeah, I'm the man game. Now, here is a game that was not an, oh yeah, I'm the man game from another one of the rookies for the Cardinals, and that was running back Trey Benson. Trey Benson did get some action in this game. I think a lot of people coming into the season, myself included, thought he had a real opportunity with his 3rd round draft capital to challenge James Conner for the RB1 role. And maybe there is still that opportunity for him down the line, but I don't think he did himself any favors with this stat line of 11 rushes for 10 yards. Let's talk about the wild inefficiency of Trey Benson today and what that kind of means when James Conner is out there. By contrast, hold on. Let me get James Conner's stat line up here real quick, just because I want to illustrate this point. James Conner, 21 carries, 122 yards, 1 touchdown, and he added a reception for 2 yards. So James Conner is getting massively involved in this run game, and they still gave Trey Benson those carries, and he did absolutely nothing. So as a Trey Benson owner, are you a little worried given what you just saw on the field for him there?
I really liked him as a prospect. Usually you don't see running backs struggle like that. You know, the NFL game is obviously better, but the RB position isn't one where you don't see people hit the ground running. If they got it. So I don't know. You don't really see an running back improvement arc usually necessary. And with how James Conner did at his age, it clearly wasn't the matchup. So yeah, man, it's not what you want to see, but I think you got to hold and wait for better days until you get a bigger picture. I wouldn't panic, Sal.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is going to make me think twice about putting Trey Benson in my lineup if I see he's available. Because I'm just not going to be optimistic that even if he does get that opportunity in the event of an injury to James Conner, like, what's he going to do with that? You know, you give him 20 carries, the guy's going to get you what, 20 yards? I mean, that's not going to cut it in the NFL. He's got to do better than that in order to get himself into this pecking order and become a fantasy contributor for you. So in Dynasty, I'm definitely a little worried about Trey Benson. Another player that I'm definitely a little worried about at this point as well is Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce, who I think is still somewhere out there on the Eras Tour. So Kansas City did win their game 26-25, and Travis Kelce did make some catches that were kind of chain movers and kind of helping his team move down the field. But in terms of fantasy production, that really is not translating. What we have seen from Kelce so far this year is really low usage. And for those who are kind of counting on him to be this kind of weekly tight end one who is equaling the production of a wide receiver most weeks, what does this mean for the dynasty owner? Is there any value you can even get out of him is the question given his age. So we're going to play this game. Okay. What are you paying for Travis Kelce? Let's start with Bobby. What would you pay to get Travis Kelce on your team for a dynasty league right now?
I know it might sound a little bit like an overpay, but I might dish a second just because it's like if I'm doing that, it's because I'm contending and I'm sitting there. Seconds can be lottos. Like seconds are 50-50 shots. And like he's performing bad right now, but I think so much of what teams are still doing is like let Rashee Rice beat us. Let Xavier Worthy beat us. We will not let Travis Kelce beat us. I think that is still so much of what's going on right now. And I think as Worthy grows, as Rashee Rice keeps catching touchdowns, maybe teams are going to start going, you know what, let's risk leaving Travis Kelce in one-on-one because these other guys are burning us now. And maybe he can come back. But yeah, it's been a really disheartening start to his season so far.
Zach, what would you do with Travis Kelce? Would you pay as high as a second rounder if you were in a contending situation? Or is it something where you're just like, I'm staying away entirely?
If I'm contending, I need a tight end. Let's say I'm an Njoku owner. Would I pay a second rounder to get Kelce? Potentially. He is super old at this point for me. He's a bit of a hot potato. He's been a hot potato. I sold him, I think, was it 2 years ago, 2 or 3 seasons ago? Like
we're holding the bag right now in that league. So
well,
yeah,
I sold him to Spain.
Spain
sold him to you, I think. But yeah, and my rule with those guys is you sell them the final year that you think you're gonna get a first for him. And that year, Spain was the only one who would give me a first for him, and that was my That was my clue. Okay, if only one person is willing, this means we're clocking out. I'm not usually going to trade future capital for anyone 30 or above. Tight ends, it's a little bit different because their prime is later, and extends later. But I mean, what is he, 34, 35? Like I think he's entering his Jason Witten era. If not this year, then next. I'd have to really be desperate, but it's not usually my brand to sell my future to win one ship. I like to keep my window open so I can win multiple ships.
We had a big injury news in this one, which is that Isaiah Pacheco is expected to miss about half the season, up to 8 games. So we're seeing Kareem Hunt getting brought in for visits. We're potentially going to see some other free agent running backs get brought into there for visits. What is this running back situation going to look like? And how, as fantasy owners, are we supposed to deal with that exactly?
I think you got to blow some fab on Kareem Hunt, man. If he gets that starting job, we've seen what he can do. He's always been good for fantasy if he's given the role, and they know him. He knows the offense. They can plug him right in, and he's an RB for one of the best offenses in the league. Fab doesn't cost anything, right? Or if you're not in fab, waiver, like that's not a draft pick. That's not a trade. You just get him. So if you can add the Chiefs lead back for free, who might even have value beyond Pacheco coming back, you blow a decent amount of fab. I'd say 50% of your budget isn't out of the question.
Something, if I'm the Chiefs, is we're seeing that they're trying to always get Xavier Worthy the ball in some forms. Does Xavier Worthy take the running back spot?
Well, the one thing I'd be concerned about there, we actually probably should dive into Worthy a little bit, right? We saw like Cam Taylor-Britt talk about some of that. He was talking a little bit of some of that trash in the locker room saying, oh, Xavier Worthy can't do nothing but fly routes and reverses, and that's all he can do. Well, we also saw Cam Taylor-Britt have one of the most devastating interceptions over something like just Michael Jordan posterized this guy with a one-handed interception in Xavier Worthy's face after he talked that trash. So, hey, man, talk it, Cam. That was awesome. Okay, that was awesome. Play of the week. But for fantasy, not so good for Xavier Worthy because he was absolutely shut down, uninvolved. He had about 20 yards in this game. And so what you're seeing here is the floor, right, of what like Xavier Worthy's worst performance is going to look like. We saw what the good can look like, and now we're seeing what the bad can look like. Now, what Bobby's saying is getting him involved in the touches, I do think that could be a possibility. We have seen Andy Reid get really creative with guys like Kadarius Toney. He's always looking for these like tiny, shifty guys that he can maybe bring into the backfield. He's always looking for creative ways to attack. So I definitely do think that we could see Xavier Worthy perhaps get in the mix with some carries out of the backfield for sure, because they are going to be looking for ways to create rushing and just take some pressure off of Mahomes. Now, like I said, we're going to get into some fantasy struggles, and boy, there were a bunch of them in this one where the Pittsburgh Steelers defeat the Denver Broncos by the score of 13-10. Now, I want to say one of the things that we said coming into this year was Arthur Smith and how he was going to work and distribute targets in the Pittsburgh offense. So can we just shout out to Arthur Smith for making his only touchdown that the Pittsburgh Steelers have produced all year go to his backup tight end? The shenanigans are still here. Darnell Washington is the only Pittsburgh Steeler with a touchdown. Their backup tight end. Gotta love it from Arthur Smith. But the real story today, I think, was Bo Nix and his struggles. Now, I'm going to bring up another Pittsburgh Steeler and invoke the name of the guy that Bo Nix is reminding me of right now, and that is Kenny Pickett. He looks so much like Kenny Pickett to me, where And they were similar prospects coming in. Like Bo Nix, it was all about the high completion percentage, all about the experience. Kenny Pickett, same thing. It was like he's a 4-year starter, man. He's got so much game experience. He's gonna be the accurate guy. But the problem is just that upside is so limited. He's not that fast of a rusher to be able to use the rushing the way that he did in college. Bo Nix, kind of the same thing. We're seeing that he just is not necessarily able to do all of the same things that he did in college. You can't just throw behind the line of scrimmage all game here. So one of the things that I think we have to ask is we kind of had this vision of Sean Payton being this quarterback guru who can work with anybody, who can get good play out of anybody. But we are not seeing that be the case with Bo Nix. Are you starting to be out on him as somebody you want to own in Dynasty? And are we starting to get out on Sean Payton as this offensive guru as well? Bobby, I know you are the Bucs fan and you have just been waiting for your chance to hate on this man's. So I'm going to give you the mic and let you talk that trash, boy.
I think when it comes to Sean Payton, like we've always talked a little bit about like those, we've had those debates in the past of like the Brady, Belichick, and like who benefits from this. That Sean Payton, Drew Brees conversations around the same topic. And it's just like, I think we're really seeing what Sean Payton is without Drew Brees. That last year in New Orleans was very meh without Drew Brees. And everything in Denver has been not that great without Drew Brees. And now he's running off Russell Wilson and paying him to go play for another team so we can watch Bo Nix. And to bring it back to Bo Nix, I was never, even though I did draft him, I was never super high on him just because being a Florida fan and being in the SEC, I remember Auburn Bo Nix. And I think a lot of people, when he went to Oregon, forgot Auburn Bo Nix. And this is what we're really getting in the NFL right now is the Auburn Bo Nix of just almost like that in over his head, like I'm running around and I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and he just seems lost. And maybe what will happen is give some time. Maybe we can get back to that Oregon Bo Nix. It's a little bit more efficient, a little bit more better at taking care of a ball. But then the question is going to become is Sean Payton going to be there to do that? Because if this all goes south and they let Sean Payton go, now you're dealing with a situation of there'll be a low draft pick. This will be a quarterback that's not for the new head coach, and they could move on very easily again. So it'll be really interesting to see if this keeps progressing south, or if Bo Nix can bounce back.
Absolutely, man. Now we are going to also go into this factor here, which is going to, I think, just transition perfectly into our next game. I'm so excited for this, that these games are just positioned this way in our rundown. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about Pittsburgh quarterback Justin Fields, who was very, very, very publicly run out of Chicago this past offseason in favor of drafting Caleb Williams. Now, let me just point this out. Justin Fields is 2-0 as the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I'm not saying he is lighting the world on fire offensively, but his style suits their team very well. Now, what we are seeing, though, is that in Chicago, Caleb Williams, the guy they replaced him with and ran him out of town for and spent the #1 overall draft pick to get and said, this is the savior of our franchise. Well, Caleb Williams is not saving this franchise because he does not look materially better than Justin Fields did when he left a year ago. That has been, to me, one of the strangest things that we have seen over this past year has been Caleb Williams' struggle to adjust to the NFL somewhat. Now, I guess the question is do we expect better days from Caleb at this point? Or are we beginning to be concerned that his entire rookie year is going to look like this, and he is not going to be somebody that you can necessarily rely being in your lineup at this time?
I definitely think you cannot start him confidently, but if you drafted him, you probably have the first overall pick, and you don't have a choice. So you are probably just riding the rookie wave. I'm not worried long term. We haven't seen enough. This is the NFL. Everything is a game of inches. To get something to even get a pass complete in the NFL, everything has to go right and the timing has to be perfect. So it's just going to take a little bit. He's not CJ Stroud. I guess that's all we can say right now is he's not CJ Stroud.
Well, and something I also remember from CJ Stroud's rookie year is like he was a little rough from the get-go. It was the Bucks game where he shredded Tampa Bay. That was like the wake-up game of CJ Stroud. Because I remember watching that game going like, oh my God, we just let CJ Stroud rip us up. And then the rest of the year, he went on and did crazy. And now he's looked at as the best quarterback of that draft. So, but yeah, to put that in perspective, like, yeah, we could be sitting here week 7, week 8, and then Caleb rips it on someone, and we're all forgetting we had these conversations about his struggles.
By the way, since we're talking about CJ Stroud, I just want to just go ahead and I just need to say it. Sam Darnold is scoring higher than CJ Stroud in fantasy football. Say it with me again. Sam Darnold is scoring higher than CJ Stroud in fantasy football for you right now. Okay, now one guy who is scoring a lot of points for you in fantasy football in this game was Nico Collins, who absolutely balled. He got you 27.5 PPR points. He had 8 of 10 receiving, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 135 yards, and a touchdown. Now, Stephon Diggs, 4 of 6 for 37. Tank Dell, 1 of 4 for 16. So essentially what I'm saying is it does look like there is a clear pecking order that is beginning to establish itself in this offense. Now, one thing that I have seen, Nico Collins has been undervalued for the guy that is being tied to kind of long-term to one of the top young quarterbacks in football playing in a talented offense. But with more games like this and this pecking order beginning to kind of clear out and him kind of being, yeah, this might be the guy here. Is Nico Collins' price going to be something that maybe we want to get ahead of? We want to get those offers out now before the owner is sitting there going, oh my God, I'm sitting on the gold mine right here. Maybe we want to just say, it's only going up from here. We need to get in now. Is this the buy high point for Nico Collins? Because I'm not going to say buy low. Buy low point is over. But is this a gravy train that, yeah, maybe we need to spend some capital to get in on?
If you want him, it's got to be now, because something that I think a lot of people forget about with Diggs there is Diggs pretty much got his deal voided. He's only there as a rental. Like, he will be gone in Houston after this year. So, I mean, if Houston was going to have him long term, they wouldn't have done this deal. They wouldn't have done anything to make him a 1-year thing and let him test free agency. So, Diggs is gone. So then you have to factor in, like, well, Nico Collins is going to get more shares and that stuff. I would say it's here, but, you know, it is the NFL, and you could sit there and go, maybe he doesn't perform as a wide receiver 1, and then Houston drafts another guy, and now we're sitting here wondering, is his targets going to go away and that. But the passing volume is still there in that offense where he should be still getting his. So I would definitely have it if you want him.
Now, one thing that I wanted to ask before we move on to some other assets in this game that I think are worth going over. Zach, if you were trading for Nico Collins, what would you say your max out offer would be?
I have tried. As soon as they inked his deal, that said he was here to stay and that he was not a 1 year wonder and that he was going to be a one in the offense. And I immediately was like, that's CJ Stroud's one for at least the next 3 years. I want him. Can't get him. I haven't been able to get him since in this off season. Ever since that deal came through, I can't get him. I'd pay a first and a second for him.
So you're basically saying, okay, I've got to go and I've got to put mega draft capital in this guy to even get the owner to talk to me. It's like a king's ransom situation. Yep. Well, maybe now's not.
Yeah, I think it's
maybe
over.
Now's not the time to even buy, knowing that information.
I think we missed it.
Yeah. Well, here are some guys that you can be kind of expecting. You may see people maybe a little more willing to get rid of, and here is one of them, which is DeAndre Swift, who's 14 carries for 18 yards. We're good for 8.2 PPR points because he got 4 catches for 24 yards, and the receiving work basically saved him from an absolutely pitiful and, I mean, he was borderline unusable anyway, but just truly unusable week. Given what we saw DeAndre Swift's ADP as in Dynasty kind of going into this season, what do you think the right move with Swift is? Is it patience, or is it, man, I've got to sell this piece now?
It's going to be hard to sell him right now, just because in order for you to sell, you have to have what you like to call hopium behind it. And I just don't see where the hopium is with this running back when he's getting 1 yard a carry. So that's my issue with trying to sell him right now.
Right. I mean, yeah, it definitely takes 2 to tango, right? You can want to sell a guy all you want, but there's also got to be that buyer, right? And what case are you going to make? Like, yeah, man, come buy DeAndre Swift. I mean, the case you can always make, right, is the PPR value is going to kind of bolster him over that. But like, Zach, why don't you tell me about Swift and what kind of upside you think he has in an attack that is like just as anemic as the Bears have been offensively all season?
I've been out on Swift for a while. There's something rotten there. He keeps hopping around from team to team. I just don't think I loved him as a prospect, but I just don't think it's working. There's got to be something. It's probably some maybe playbook thing with him would be my guess. Like maybe there's something where he just doesn't do the homework or something. But every team keeps rejecting him. Like they like what they see on film on another team, and then they bring him in the building and they're like, not worth it. So I don't like the carousel. I also am a fan of Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. So I've been out on him.
The thing with Roschon, though, he seems entirely factored out. Like he's not even in the mix at all. He didn't register a carry in this game. Travis Homer got a carry over him. DeAndre Swift, 14 carries. Khalil Herbert was barely getting carries. 2 carries, 3 yards. He did get a touchdown, couple receptions, so he got 8.7 on the day, but the usage is just not there for anyone except Swift, and Swift isn't doing anything with it.
Yeah, it was a Caleb day, right? I mean, 37 attempts. They really didn't feel like they could go to the ground against this Texans defense.
That's what's crazy for me is that like I would try to establish a run game to help my rookie quarterback, and the fact that and it's not like when you're looking at a box score like this, you'd think like it's got to be script that they had to abandon the run. Like no, it was a close game this all 4 quarters. Like why is DeAndre Swift? I mean, DeAndre Swift getting 14 carries, that's a decent workload, but like, why are you only running the ball? Take away some of Caleb's carries. Why are you only running the ball 17 times?
It wasn't working. They had to abandon it, not because of the score, but just because it was an instant way to punt. And I think a big takeaway from this is Houston Texans are no longer the easy running back matchup. You no longer throw Jonathan Taylor in and get 30 points against the Texans twice a year. they've done something new.
Right. If you started the Texans running back, though, not a good time either. Joe Mixon suffered an injury in this game. We're not entirely sure what his availability is going to be next week. He got 9 carries, 25 yards, 3 of 5 receiving for 25 yards, no touchdowns. Good for 8 PPR points on the day, just not much of a factor for you. Cam Akers didn't do much with the work that he got. He lost a fumble. That's definitely going to hurt his opportunities getting on the field. You saw Dare Ogunbowale get involved a little bit, but only 4 points there. So really, it was the only fantasy contributor that was really going to getting anything for you today was Nico Collins and his 27 points, where CJ Stroud's 14 was not necessarily moving the needle for you. Now, we are going to move on and try to break down one more game before we get out of here. Now, granted, all of us have been recording this podcast while this game was going on. So we do not have a lot of great football insight for you about how this game unfolded, but we are going to break down the stat lines, maybe some of their impact today. So I'm going to go through it with you guys. Atlanta Falcons defeat the Philadelphia Eagles 22-21 on Monday Night Football. Jalen Hurts, 23 of 30 completions, 183 yards, a touchdown, a pick. He did, however, have 13 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. So he was essentially your running back 2, or running back 1, in addition to his passing numbers. Yeah, he was crushing it. He got you 24 points today. Kirk Cousins, efficient, 20 of 29, 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, -1 yards rushing on 4 carries. Bijan Robinson, 16 points. He got 14 carries for 97 yards, 5 receptions, 25 yards. Tyler Algier got in the mix, 9 carries, 53 yards. Saquon Barkley, 17 PPR points, 22 carries, 95 yards, a 2-point conversion. We got 4 receptions for 21 yards. So no TDs for Saquon, but he did visit the end zone in the form of that 2-point conversion there. Devontae Smith, in AJ Brown's absence, serves as the wide receiver 1 and dominates targets. He got 10 of them. He converted 7 of those into receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. Darnell Mooney had a big day for you in fantasy with 3 of 7 receptions, but made him count, 88 yards and a touchdown. Drake London getting in the action today, 6 of 7 receptions, 54 yards and a touchdown. I have no idea who this guy is, but Covey for the Eagles gets 6 receptions for 23 yards, and he got you 8 points. He was the second receiver behind Devontae Smith. So what we can see is that from a receiver perspective, when AJ Brown is out, it is the Devontae Smith show. Dallas Goedert did not get in the mix that much. You only got 4 looks, turned 3 of those into 38 yards. I think it's pretty safe to say in this offense, not much of a factor. Kyle Pitts, 3 of 4 for 20 yards. So he is continuing his absolute stinkathon that his career has been for you in fantasy football. I am so sorry, Kyle. I love you from your UF days, but my God, man, we got to get some more. That's ridiculous. And if you're playing kickers in your league, Young Eku converted 3 of his field goals and got you 10 points in fantasy as well. So that is our roundup. Obviously, I think for me, when I'm looking at that, I think really the Falcons kind of coming to life offensively and us being able to see kind of the production we were expecting Kirk Cousins to bring to the table finally here. Remember, week 1 is weird. So now week 2, we kind of got our rhythm, right? Kirk Cousins had a really nice day. Bijan Robinson definitely getting you the touches still. He got 19 touches on the day. That is particularly a story for me. But really, I think it's really the passing offense from Atlanta. We're starting to see Darnell Mooney is becoming a contributor. Drake London, they each got 17 points PPR this week. So those guys are guys that are benefiting from that passing offense evolving. Now we're going to get into a little bit. Zach, Bobby and I talked a little bit about Drake London on our show last week, and we basically said he is a guy that we're probably hitting the panic button on a little bit. So talk about this game for the Drake London owners out there and kind of what this means. Do you think we can expect this, given that now we've seen him get in the end zone against Philly and doing this, getting them a win? The targets are working. Is he ascending? Is this it?
Yeah, this is kind of like the JSN thing, right? You know, he didn't have 16 targets because, you know, it's not that kind of offense. They've got Bijan and they've got Pitts as well. Yeah, I'm not worried about Drake London long term. He's an elite prospect. I'm completely ignoring the last 2 years for Falcons players. I think they were in Desmond Ridder jail, and really it's like a double red shirt at this point for this offense. So now we're seeing the Falcons become a serviceable NFL offense, and we can start actually evaluating these players. Kyle Pitts got a touchdown last week, doesn't get the touchdown this week. I think all of these guys are getting stat lines that are dependent on touchdowns for you to be happy right now. So this seems to be kind of a who's getting the touchdowns week to week you'll be happy with, and who doesn't you'll be like, meh. I think it's important to note that Ray McCloud gets 5 targets this game after getting 7 targets last game, locking up the slot wide receiver job. So he's a good stash. He's a good wire pickup if you haven't gotten him already. I saw him trending on Sleeper once he won the job, and a few people picked him up. But now, if he's still out there, he definitely shouldn't be.
Okay, before we get out of here, one thing we got to talk about, I think, is being the Kyle Pitts owner, right? And let's say you are somebody who made one of those moves to get him really high up in your draft, and you just have been holding on and you haven't sold yet. And I think one of the things that I think we were all kind of sold coming into this year is just the quarterback improvement is going to benefit Pitts, and also the change away from Arthur Smith is going to benefit Pitts. But what we're seeing is Kyle Pitts' usage is still looking fairly consistent with what we got out of the Arthur Smith offense. Is that just who Kyle Pitts is? Bobby, are you thinking that this is the time to sell, or is it time to just hold out just another week? It's gonna happen, man.
Yeah, I think you have to keep holding out. It's still really frustrating, but it's like, I think at the end of the day, the offers you're going to be getting right now are not going to be worth what he means to your team. So it's going to be one of those things where it's just like, you're just going to have to hold, and maybe one day if he can get something, you can flip him. But I think he's not worth cutting, and I think no team's going to offer you enough to move him right now.
Okay, let's set that up. Okay, Zach. Zach, what pick would you give to get Kyle Pitts in a dynasty league?
I will say that this year I needed a tight end and a super flex best ball, and I gave up 110 for him because I knew I wouldn't get Bowers there.
Okay, so you gave up 110 to get him. Would you still give that same pick now?
Yeah, I still would. Just because I like Kyle Pitts' situation better than probably anyone else I would have been able to get for that pick. Unfortunately, you know, you're not going to get anyone ranked higher than Kyle Pitts for a late first. So you just kind of gotta wait. I mean, what you do like to see is the offense is going in the right direction. Not a great sample size over 2 weeks, but he did get the touchdown last week. So Can he do the Quentin Johnston thing and have low volume but get the touchdowns?
Well,
You
that
know
would
what I
be
mean?
nice.
I think he can, and we just got to see what's going to happen. Because we have a 2-game sample size.
Yeah, I mean, I'll fire back a little bit on that one and say if 110 is the asking price, I am absolutely not paying it. I am out on that negotiation because one of the things that while you are absolutely right in that Kyle Pitts can do these things, one thing that you really have to ask yourself is instead of can he do these things, will he do these things? Yes, we know he has potential. I've heard that for years. Potential, potential, potential. Well, potential is only so valuable in fantasy football. At some point, you actually do have to turn potential into another word, which is called production. And we do not ever really see that from Kyle Pitts. I am absolutely out on him as a prospect in general. For fantasy football, I am selling anywhere that I have him. And man, if you're paying 110, come and get him. Come and get him. Okay, so we are going to end our conversation today on that lovely note about sell Pitts or buy him if you're like Zach. So if you've enjoyed today's conversation breaking down week 2 of fantasy football, well then keep it locked right here on the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show, where Dynasty never sleeps. Now, before I log off, for myself, Alex Klausner, my co-hosts, Bobby Carney, Zack Donovan, I do want to say this is a 100% independently produced podcast. We have been busting butt all day trying to get this thing. Bobby is joining us all the way from fresh off of a flight across the country. So I just want to say, if you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, do whatever you can to support the podcast. Tell your friends, yell at us in the comments. We love to debate. Obviously, we're here on a podcast talking about fantasy football. So if you want to jump in that conversation with us, please hit us up on all of our social media at Dynasty FF Show. And yeah, we'll be seeing you on the bonus episodes that we got coming out for you on our next Thursday show and right here on the Sunday Big Show next week. Everyone, have a great rest of your night, and thank you so much for spending any part of your day with us. We do so appreciate it. Have a great night, everybody. I've been Alex, and this has been the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show.